Okay. First, our pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Contain open public meetings notice.
The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Montville Township Board of Education provided a public notice of this meeting, which included the time, date, and location that was posted at the Montville Township Municipal Building, all Montville Public Schools, the Montville Public Library, the Montville Township Board of Education Administrative Office Building, the district website, and advertised in the Daily Record, the board's official newspaper, on January 10th, 2020.
Okay, high school representatives are not here, so I guess Dr. Ofer, you're up.
Okay, I don't believe that Mr. Grau has joined us yet, so I think what I would like to do is to turn things over to Dr. Shorter with regard to the report on the NJSLA-Science assessment. If we could do that first before we deal with the graduation discussion.
Okay, Dr. Shorter.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I know that technology said I could share my screen, so I'm going to give that a try now, and I'll briefly take you through the presentation. So give me 1 second. I'm not sure if everyone can see that.
Yes.
Yes. Seeing it?
Okay, great. Yes. As Renee mentioned, I'm going to very briefly take you through a snapshot of the NJSLA-Science results. This was our first administration of this new test, which we'll talk a little bit about, and go over some of the numbers that we put together. First, and let me see if I can, oh, there we go. First, a little bit about the test. As you may recall, we used to have the NJ Ask that was offered to 4th graders and 8th graders a number of years ago. The federal government requires that grades in 5, 8, and 11 be tested by 5th, 8th, and 11th. We used to give the high school students the bio test that never really counted for anything, but it was given every year. That has been replaced by this new learning assessment in science. And rather than testing 4th and 8th grade like we did in the Ask, we're now testing 5th and 8th graders with this assessment. It gives a snapshot of how students are meeting the student learning performance standards that were new. And this test was developed in collaboration, as you can see there, with New Jersey educators, the Department of Education, and there are 2 contracted vendors that the DOE works with. Pearson, who you might be familiar with the park, and also another Measurement Incorporated company that also helps support the science test. And as I mentioned before, it replaces the old NJ Ask test in science. Why do we need a new test? Well, the standards changed. So this test is an attempt to measure those standards. They're much more rigorous. I think the scores that we achieved demonstrate that, not only us, but across the state. That's a much more rigorous test, and the standards are much more rigorous than they were under the NJ Ask assessment. I know Andrea worked very hard with the science supervisor in transitioning our district into a full implementation of the science standards, and it took a number of years there, as you can see, and we're in full implementation by 2017. So how does this look different than other tests? I had mentioned that it's much more rigorous than the NJ Ask. The NJ Ask required a lot of memorization of the kids, and frankly, and the DOE had admitted this, it really wasn't a great test. This test is much more involved. It requires kids to apply their knowledge in science rather than just memorize a number of facts. So it's a different experience for our kids, especially in the area of science as far as the assessments go. Just a quick snapshot of the number of students that we tested, about 300 per grade level and just under 950 students across the district. So we did have a strong level of participation for this test. Like I said, our first administration of this new test last spring. One of the things that you may recall, the NJASC had 5 levels of performance. This test actually cuts that down to 4, with level 1 being the minimal standard. Essentially, any students that score a level 1, it's demonstrating a minimal understanding of the learning standards, and they're misinterpreting a lot of information. So that's a level 1. As we move up that scale, level 2 is just under grade level. It's very limited grade level understanding, and students are only partially interpreting some of the information that they need to related to the standards. And as we move up to the top 2 levels, and these are the 2 levels we focus on for the most part when we look at our outcomes. Level 3, which is essentially grade level. The students are comprehending the information in the expected way at the grade level that they're in. Level 4 are those students who exceed and demonstrate an advanced understanding in their ability to interpret information with a variety of sources and applying it to a lot of different scenarios. So that level 4 used to be the advanced proficient that we used to know from the NJASC. So again, just a little bit of a change from the NJASC. They cut it down to 4 levels of performance rather than 5. And here's a snapshot of our performance. And I always like to direct you to the right side of the screen. That's the percentage of our students in each one of those indicated grade levels of our students that scored level 3 or 4, which is really grade level and above. And in comparison, you know, when we took the old NJASC, for a number of years, we scored consistently in the 90th percentile across the board. Like I said, it was a much different test. You can see by these scores here, you know, 51% of our students in grade 5 achieved the 3 or 4 competency on through 8th grade and 11th grade. So these numbers absolutely reflect much lower achievement level than the NJASC did, but you'll see in a later slide that that's consistent with how just about every district had done across the state, because it is a new test. They're setting a new cut score, and they're setting the new level expectation. So we're expecting that our students will improve each year as they get more used to the test and what's required. This one's a little more complicated. This compares us, like I'd mentioned, to the state of New Jersey. So the question might be, well, how are we doing compared to the state with those scores? And again, I'll direct you to the right side of the screen. That's probably the easiest. That shows the differential that Montville Township students scored versus the state. So while we're not thrilled with their numbers, because in comparison to the NJASC, they are much lower. However, when you compare them to how the rest of the state did, you can see that on average, we're 21 percentage points higher in grade 5 than the state average. In grade 8, we're nearly 19% higher than the state average. And then in 11th grade, we're nearly 13 or just over 13 percentage points higher than the state. So when taken in perspective, these are the kind of numbers that we've consistently gotten on these standardized test scores. They just reflect a much lower overall score in the standard setting because it is a new test. So while we want to improve those, we feel pretty good about the differential between how we performed and the rest of the state of New Jersey performed. One of the requirements in presenting tonight is for the to present subgroups. So we're required to present that publicly. So I always like to include a chart of the subgroups based on race, which again is a requirement. And you can see there, the blue indicates performance in the science 5th grade. The red bars indicate each subgroup's performance in the science in 8th. And then the green represents the performance of science 11 in each one of those racial subgroups. So now we have this data, this new set of data that we have to look at, analyze, and see where our kids could use some improvement, some areas of focus. So this is how we're going to use our data. And one of the things that I mentioned anytime that I present on our results on standardized test scores, whether it be the PARCC, whether it be the NJSLA, whether it be the new NJSLA-Science, it's really just one piece of data that we include in our overall assessment of student data, from classroom data, exam data, summative and formative data that teachers are taking within the classroom. We combine that with the state standardized tests, which gives us a good overall picture of how our students are doing in comparison to the standards that are required of the state for our students to achieve. So step one of the process really is to look at it and review it. It's a new test. I know Dr. Schwartz, our science supervisor, has really analyzed the data over and over again to really get a sense of what they're looking for, what type of test questions that we could expect in the future. And she's meeting with the building level administration, with the teachers to look at, the overall individual student strengths and weaknesses on, why they scored a certain way in a certain area of science within this test. And she's going to be working, all the way down to the classroom level to try to improve those areas that the test demonstrated that was a weakness for us. And as I mentioned before, we're combining this data, these test results, with all the other pieces of data that we have at the classroom level. And a lot of it is becoming familiar with the test, the teachers and the students getting comfortable with the test. And there'll be a lot of practice and sample tasks that we're gonna use moving forward. Because I think just the familiarity or lack of familiarity with the test may have been one of the reasons why the scores were a little bit lower than we're accustomed to. At the first time out, which is why we expect to see some improvement immediately just in familiarity from the test next year. And that's about it. Pretty straightforward. Like I mentioned, it's a first year through. So we have a lot of assessing to do and analyzing to do. But I know Dr. Schwartz, along with Andrea, are working very hard in trying to, dig into the data and see those areas that we can address at the classroom level.
Okay. Can you get off the screen, Casey? You have to go back on gallery view. Is that it?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Any questions, comments from the board? No questions. Okay. Charlie, you want to take over? You're on mute, Charlie. Charlie's still on mute.
Yeah, we're working on it.
How's that now?
There he is.
There you go. We got you.
Was Casey, did he kick off the meeting?
Yes,
we
because I wanted to make sure that I want to make sure we got you on to the meeting, Mr. Grau, before we did some of the other things. Let me just conclude my report by indicating that we are extremely proud of both Hilldale and Valley View elementary schools. Over the past week, we did receive a notification that they both have been named National Schools of Character. So we salute them, and we're very proud for them to join the rest of the elementary schools in Lazar in earning that distinction.
Thank you, Renee.
I just want to note, and then I think I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Sanford for a graduation update, but I did want to note that based on the information that we received from the governor's office today with regard to the provision to allow in-person graduations beginning July 6th, my recommendation would be that we withdraw item J3 from the agenda.
Okay.
And now I would turn things over to Mr. Sanford to provide an update in terms of the graduation activity.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Rovtar, and thank you, Board of Education members. As Dr. Rovtar pointed out, the news came out today from Governor Murphy that in-person graduation ceremonies are going to be allowed beginning on July 6th. In-person outdoor graduation ceremonies. There was also some information that came out from the Office of Emergency Management that gave a little bit more detail, but we anticipate that either tomorrow or the next day, we should get, see more specific detail, and maybe in the form of an executive order or some other type of guidance that's put out, potentially talking about the capacity that would be allowed in terms of number of attendees. We're before we put out an official announcement, we're going to wait for that information to come out. So basically what we're doing right now is, since the last board meeting, a lot has happened. We've had updates like a drive-through graduation being possible. We had even kicked around the idea of a drive-in graduation up in Warwick, New York. Dr. Rovtar, I assume that item J, something that you just referenced, was perhaps that field trip?
No, that's actually still on the agenda. We're keeping our
Okay.
options open.
All right, good idea. So we are tentatively looking at having an outdoor ceremony, an outdoor in-person ceremony on July 6th. We have already been in contact with all the vendors that support the event. And we've basically got everything booked for an outdoor ceremony on July 6th. As I said before, we're waiting right now for more specific guidance on how many attendees. Is this the type of thing where we'll have be allowed to have enough people attend that we could run, a ceremony with all 310 plus students? Is it big enough for that? Is it going to be big enough for them to have guests in attendance? So again, we're waiting for that information to come out. I will tell you, because it's going to be in July, the temperature will be hotter. The chances of rainstorms later in the day are always greater the further you get into summer. We anticipate that on July 6th, we'll likely be doing a morning graduation ceremony as opposed to an evening graduation ceremony. But all those final details will be put together in the next 48 hours, and we plan on giving a written update as well as another video update by the end of this week. So again, to kind of summarize, basically what we're doing now is all focus has shifted to doing an in-person outdoor ceremony on July 6th. We continue our planning for the virtual ceremony. As we have said all along, that virtual ceremony was always going to be the bare minimum, but we'll be ready to add to it. So we will never dispose of that idea. That idea still stays in effect. So we want students to continue to do all they're doing to submit content for that for that virtual graduation. And that kind of leads me to my second point. This past Friday, hopefully all of you have heard, was a banner day in Montville Township in the sense that caps and gowns were distributed by roughly 50 volunteer staff members to every senior household across town. One of the volunteers was Dr. Rovtar herself, along with teachers, different staff members, and administrators at the high school. Really was a special day. Really appreciate all the help from the different staff that gave up their own time to do that, and to really try and make that day as meaningful as possible for all of our seniors. But from that point until the end of this week, now seniors are taking pictures in their caps and gowns. We ask for specific photos and videos, at no more than 10-second videos, of them wearing their gown, moving their tassel from right to left, tossing their cap in the air, those signature things they do in a graduation cap and gown. So that's the gist on graduation. I can talk about prom and senior awards if you'd like, or do you want to take questions at this point?
Graduation tonight. Okay.
Just stay with graduation? Okay.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Keep in mind what Dr. Rovtar and Mr. Sanford said, that we're waiting.
We kind of lost your audio, Mr. Grau. But I probably at this point is a good time for me to say, I'm assuming that we're opening it up to questions as we have in the past, that if you're joining us on YouTube, but you'd like to speak during this comment portion of the meeting, please follow the directions in the video description below for how to join us in the Zoom webinar. Please note that you may need to click Show More in order to see those directions. Once you've joined us in the Zoom webinar, if you could please click the raised hand button to request to be recognized, I will recognize you so that you can speak, and I will announce you by name.
I assume you can't hear me?
We can hear you now,
Now
Charlie.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to thank Dr. Rovtar and Mr. Sanford for their updates. And I'm sure they have their work cut out for them for the next couple of weeks. And I know, Doug, anything that you send out to the parents or the students or something, don't forget the carbon copy of the board, just so we're aware of what the great work you guys are all doing. Now we'll answer the questions as Dr. Rovtar gave you instructions.
Right. So if there is anyone that would like to pose a question, if you could raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
Okay. They'll have an opportunity at the end of the meeting, so why don't we
Oh,
go back?
wait, we do. All right, we do have one question. Business development, I can't remember who that is, but you are recognized and you have the floor.
Okay, yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, your name, please?
Okay. Yes. Yes, hi, my name is Kathleen Colatrella, and I have a senior, Claudia Colatrella. And I just wanted to first thank Dr. Rotar and Mr. Sanford for really coming through and setting a date in which we will possibly have, or we will have, an in-person graduation, because I think this is the sentiment that's shared by all the parents. I want to just still offer the possibility of having a committee that will involve maybe a small group of parents and students and maybe even community members to sort of bring this all together, because I just from viewing different videos of different schools, there is a lot to consider, being that it's a modified, ceremony. So I still recommend that we do that. And if that's at all possible and you guys are open to that, please let us know, and we'll make sure that we identify just a small group of parents that can communicate with all the parents and sort of streamline things a bit. Okay.
Okay, I do not see anyone else with their hand raised at this. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Christopher Arena.
Hello? Anybody there?
Hi. Yeah, this
Hold on.
is Christopher. Yeah, just one question.
Go ahead.
Did I mute him? Yeah.
Hold on just a second. He's right up at the top. He's right up at the top. Okay, Christopher Arena, I believe you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Understand that July 6th is a Monday and it's a holiday weekend, not showing how corporate offices have their vacation schedules, but typically you might get Monday as a vacation day, or people might be traveling back on that Monday. Is there any thought to do it on July 7th, just in case people are traveling and Monday is a travel day?
I think, I don't want to speak for Mr. Sanford, but I think our belief was that at this point in time, the travel was probably going to be very minimal. And if we indicated to people early enough that our intention was to hold the ceremony on July 6th, that people could arrange their schedules to be present for that event.
Great.
All right, anybody else?
No, okay.
Anybody else, Renee? Hello?
Yes, Mrs. Gilmore. She's still showing as muted.
He's on mute.
This will be the last question for a while until we do the agenda, and we'll come back.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't
Mrs.
realize
Gilmore, I believe. That's
Yeah, I'm
okay.
sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
didn't
Mrs.
realize
Gilmore. You have the floor.
Yes, I want to thank Dr. Rotar, Mr. Sanford, and the Board of Ed. Obviously, everyone's delighted that we've set a date for July 6th. And I just want to understand how we can kind of finish the virtual, how Mr. Sanford's thinking about the virtual video. Is he thinking that as, would be an enduring memoir, and kind of what we can do to support that, so it is something that's usable in whatever format we could have it? And with that, I just want to clarify that the actual graduation itself will be on July 6th. In other words, not through the virtual mechanism.
It'll be the actual graduation. Yeah. Hello?
Great. So is
So
there?
I
is
can
there-
offer some, yeah. So the virtual graduation, right now, the students should be working on 2 videos and 2 pictures in their caps and gowns, just following along with the instructions that were given out at the end of last week. They were sent out on Thursday in both a video update and a written update that came out through email in several different ways, including the PTC Bridge. That virtual graduation will, if all goes according to plan, and we don't have any drastic changes by our governor from this point forward, then the virtual graduation will become more of a memento than it would serve as a primary graduation ceremony. In other words, unless the further updates we get this week, radically cause us to radically modify our traditional ceremony, the experience we have on July 6th, we will as closely as possible resemble a traditional in-person ceremony. The biggest thing is going to be the distancing of the students, and if we're allowed to have audience members, as well as any personal protective equipment that people may have to wear.
All right. Any other questions, Renee? All right.
No, I don't see any.
All right. Let's go back to the agenda then. We can open up later if any latecomers come in, okay? All right. You are pulling which item, Dr. Rotar?
J3.
All right. So everyone please cross out J3. And then could I have a motion on the agenda, please?
So moved.
All right, any questions on the minutes? Any questions? Item H? I, K, K, L, and M. And I think Dr. Rotar spoke to item M3, the field trip, at this time. All right, any questions on anything? All right, Mr. Stunt, a roll call, please.
Mr. Palma,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Aye.
Dr. Cordolino,
Yes.
Mr. Daughtry,
Yes.
Mrs. Fano,
Yes.
Dr. Modrak,
Yes.
Mr. Rappaport,
Yes.
Ms. Zuckerman,
Yes.
Mr. Grau.
Yes. Thank you. Old business, item section Q. Section R, general board comments and new business. We will be having 2 board members in June also. They'll be what, the 2nd and 16th, Katine?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Charlie, I just wanted to congratulate Dr. Rotar on being selected to serve on the Department of Education Steering Committee for ways that schools will reopen in September. I think that's a really distinct honor, Renee, and you deserve it.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Also, the Board of Education went in as required by law to have an evaluation of the superintendent. That was done in May. We had a representative from the school boards and all 9 board members. The evaluation was very positive, and we're happy to have Dr. Renee continue with us as superintendent. Thank you, Renee. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anything
Yeah,
else from board
Charlie,
members?
I think what the teachers did this week the staff that went around, including Renee and Doug, handing out gowns and caps. That was amazing. And, you know, we have really special staff here in Montville. So thank you, Doug.
And I think also quite a few of the teachers that went on VFW with the cemeteries.
Yep.
I they were on the tap. They should be congratulated also. And all of the staff, they're doing a lot behind the scenes, whether it's going to the kids' houses or driving by. We really appreciate the efforts you are making. All right, I will open it up for public participation. Just to reiterate, Dr. Rovtar and Mr. Stanford gave a brief presentation. We're really for guidelines. The graduation person, if you will be on July 6th. The virtual graduation will be like a momentum, something of that nature. There will be no affair on June 23rd, and about it possibly being in the morning. However, that's a later date. So, are there any questions from the public before we adjourn?
Let me just check for, hold on a second. I do not see anyone with their hand up at this time.
All right, well, remind them that they can come back on the 2nd. Mr. Stanford said he will keep the parents and the students aware of what is happening. And if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And we'll see you all on the 3rd, which is, that's next week, I guess, huh?
The second, next Tuesday, a week from tonight.
Time flies when you're having fun.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.